Hey guys, welcome to CraterMania. I'm your host, the man they call Crater, and I'd like to welcome you to this preview I'm doing for the build up and the breakdown of WrestleMania 42. Um, there's a lot to talk about because there's two nights of this. Once again, we have 7 matches as of right now on night one and 6 matches on night two. And basically, what I'm going to be doing with this show is just breaking down everything for each of these matches going into WrestleMania, just the build up, the history of some of the feuds, and I'm not really going to be giving any kind of opinions on any of them tonight, um, or any kind of predictions or anything. I'm going to save that for this Wednesday because I'm going to be doing a show this Wednesday, 10 p.m. Eastern Time with John Grande of Grande's Graveyard and, of course, Stuntman Mark, as we're going to be doing a Road to WrestleMania roundtable. So we'll be talking about all of our opinions on all these matches I'm talking about tonight, and you'll be giving our predictions as well. So just like I said, I'm just going to be talking about these matches, everything that's happened that we've seen on TV so far, everything, as far as some of the history that dates back further than the road to WrestleMania, with some of these feuds, like, CM Punk and Roman Reigns and Finn Balor and Dominic Mysterio, just to name a few. But it's going to be a lot of fun. So, I've worked a little, really hard this week on just kind of, gathering notes. I made like almost 7 pages of notes, guys, of just on everything of these matches, leading up to WrestleMania 42. So let's go ahead. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff to talk about here. So let's go ahead and jump right into this with the first match. Um, for WrestleMania 42 Night 1, and I assume this will be the first match, because they WWE did make a formal announcement that, for the first hour on ESPN, we'll get to see, or ESPN2, whatever it is, we'll get to see Drew McIntyre and Jacob Fatu, and also the 6-man tag match. Now, if I was WWE, I would put the 6-man tag match on first out of those two. Um, just, but I mean, if even if they do go with Drew and Jacob first, that works as well. But like, let's go ahead and just assume that they're going to start off with the 6-man tag. So, um, this actually, I feel like this is a really fun, kind of chaotic WrestleMania build. You've got uh, injuries involved here, and mystery attacks, and celebrity involvement, and there's even a little bit of Danhausen supernatural weirdness all mixed together within this story going into WrestleMania. So let's start going back to June of 2025. Um, LA Knight has been locked in this kind of long running feud with the Vision, since June 2025. And, just the group has been constantly interfering in his matches and just, preventing him from gaining any kind of momentum. Um, and there's a moment with, I think it's in December of 2025, on December the 8th to be exact. Bronson Reed attacks LA Knight, and LA Knight is taken out with this, this devastating assault from Bronson Reed, and it writes, um, LA Knight off TV. So fast forward to February the 2nd of 2026. LA Knight makes his return, and ironically enough, it's the same night that Braun Breaker got injured and is then taken off TV. Um, and just to make matters worse, a few weeks later, on February the 23rd, Bronson Reed he gets injured as well because he's put in this, this triple threat qualifying match for the Elimination Chamber. Um, and from what I understand, Bronson was supposed to have won that match. Um, Now I don't know if this is the case, but I feel like Braun Breaker was supposed to be in that spot in the Elimination Chamber, but then they had to kind of like switch gears, put Bronson Reed in there, but Bronson Reed gets injured. So Jey Uso won that triple threat match, qualified for the Elimination Chamber. Now, it starts to make a little bit more sense now when it comes to that Friday on SmackDown. Jey Uso is attacked backstage by this unknown person. It's the night before Elimination Chamber. So then they replace Jey Uso in Elimination Chamber with Logan Paul. So it starts kind of coming more clear to me, like, okay, um, so they had to have a Vision member in that spot in Elimination Chamber. And it makes more sense if you think about what happens in the Elimination Chamber when Seth Rollins comes in and attacks Logan Paul, costing him the chance of winning. So to me, that tells me that that was supposed to be originally Braun Breaker being attacked by Seth Rollins, which would lead into their match that was supposed to happen at WrestleMania this year. But as we know, that didn't happen. So this kind of adds this another layer, of chaos, and just and it leaves Logan and the rest of the Vision, just furious. So Logan Paul and Austin Theory, instead of Logan continuing any kind of feud with Seth, but after Seth attacked him in the Elimination Chamber, they just go back to targeting LA Knight. Because I guess that's the plan. They didn't want to change that up. Um, and then the Usos step in, and start to back up LA Knight, especially after Jay's attack on SmackDown. So then, even though it was a mystery person, we're assuming it was either Logan Paul or Austin Theory that attacked Jay. So this kind of rivalry then, it just escalates into this kind of full faction war. So then, where we have the Usos and LA Knight, and they're feuding against just Logan Paul and Austin Theory, and Bronson Reed's not there. So that, again, that tells me I think that Bronson Reed, that was the plan all along for that 6-man tag, but Bronson Reed can't be in that now. So who do they get? I Show Speed. So I Show Speed, and I kind of get it. Like, he has like the internet influence stuff, YouTube, he's friends with Logan Paul. It makes sense. He's been in the WWE before, he was in that Royal Rumble where he got freaking decimated by Braun Breaker. But so I Show Speed shows up, and before he's put into this kind of program with the Vision, the Usos, LA Knight, he shows up backstage, and he has this interaction with Danhausen, and Danhausen curses Speed. So then, if you follow Speed on like all his social media stuff, you know that he's like continuing that story where he's cursed by Danhausen. He's missing flights, stuff is getting canceled on him, and so he's just having all this terrible luck. So it just kind of causes Speed to just act very erratic and unpredictable. And then, so he shows up again on Raw on the March 30th Raw, and interferes in that match between the Vision, Logan Paul, and Austin Theory against the Usos for the tag team championships. And he actually ends up helping them in a way win the tag titles. So this kind of solidifies him as aligned, against LA Knight and the Usos. And more of that bad luck starts to unfold for Speed as Adam Pearce announces that 6-man tag at WrestleMania 42, between the Usos and LA Knight versus the Vision and I Show Speed. So, what do I think about this match as far as the build-up goes? Well, I guess you'll have to wait to see this Wednesday because, like I said, tonight I'm just kind of giving you the breakdown of the history of each of these matches. And but I will say that I'll give you a little bit of spoiler of what I think, and that is that it is fun to me. I think, especially if they're going to have celebrity involvement, then the beginning of night one of WrestleMania is the perfect place to put that. Now more on that later. We'll get on and into when we get to the Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton stuff. But moving on to the next match, which if this ends up being the second match. It could be the first, who knows? But Drew McIntyre versus Jacob Fatu in an unsanctioned match. Um, so let's go back to October 17th, 2025 on SmackDown. This was the night that Jacob Fatu was attacked by this another mystery person, and he disappears, for a couple months. When in reality, I think he had to have there was something going on with his teeth. He had some kind of surgery involving his teeth. But anyway, like so storyline wise, though, he's attacked, he's taken off TV. We're not really given any answers or any suspects or anything like that. But I think the majority assumption is that it was Drew McIntyre. Um, but it plants those seeds, who took Jacob out or whatever. Um, so fast forward to January the 9th, 2026 of SmackDown. This was the return of Jacob Fatu, and it was during the Drew McIntyre versus Cody Rhodes steel cage match for the WWE Championship. So Jacob interferes in this, but he kind of lets himself get out of control, because of his hatred for Drew, and Cody's there, and then him and Cody kind of getting this, fight, or whatever. And while they got their Cody and Jacob got their thing going on, Drew slips out the back door of the cage, and wins the WWE Championship. So at this point, Drew benefits becoming the champion once again. Cody gets screwed, and Jacob looks dangerous, but he's unfocused. So then we go to the March 6th, 2026 SmackDown. This is after the Elimination Chamber. Drew had just screwed Cody over at the end of the Elimination Chamber match, which led to Orton winning the match. So Nick Aldis, on that post show of the Elimination Chamber, he decided to make this title rematch between Drew and Cody for the upcoming SmackDown. And to me, that told me right away. I was like, okay, so Cody is going to win this match, because to me, like personally, I wanted to see Cody and Orton have a one-on-one match at WrestleMania. I know there was like rumors there for a while that they were going to do a fatal four-way. It was going to be Drew and Jacob, Cody and Randy, and I was like, I don't really want to see a fatal four-way. I mean, I don't think fatal four-ways really work for main events of WrestleMania. It's better to see a one-on-one match. And I mean, if you look back at WrestleMania 2000, you had Rock, Mankind, Big Show, and Triple H, McMahon in every corner. I'm not the biggest fan of that match, and just but if it was on any other kind of throwaway pay per view or a Raw or SmackDown, I mean, I'd probably enjoy it more. But like, I just feel like WrestleMania is an event where you need to have these one-on-one matches because the payoff is better that way, and it helps kind of, because if you do a fatal four-way at WrestleMania, and I mean that's not really like a feud ending. It's not the culmination of a feud, because if those other three guys that lose, it's gonna continue further on the upcoming pay-per-views. But I think WrestleMania should be used as a culmination of a feud. And I'm so glad that they went that direction, though, with just Cody and Randy one on one. But we'll get to that in just a little bit. But more on, Jacob and Drew. So, this time, he cost Drew the championship. Cody regains the title. And so now that dynamic flips. Drew believes Jacob is targeting him. Um, so on the next SmackDown, March 13th, 2026, Drew opens the show. He comes out all emotional like, and he says he's done with WWE. He's quitting WWE, and us as the fans, the crowd, is we have to believe like, oh, Drew's gone. He's quit WWE. I mean, what are they going to do now? But of course, at the end of the show, Drew returns, he destroys Jacob Fatu, setting up this feud between them going into WrestleMania. This is the moment the feud becomes personal and violent, and uh, and that leads into the next SmackDown on March the 20th, where it's just total chaos. The show opens up with this full on brawl out in the parking lot, and it just continues all throughout the night. There's backstage fights. Security's unable to stop them. And honestly, and I was talking to John from Grande's Graveyard about this. To me, this was like the best SmackDown that I've seen in a long time. I thought it was great. And in the final moment of that SmackDown, it shows Drew and Jacob up on this like tower type structure, and they're fighting, and then they both fall off this tower. And you don't see like where they land or anything because it's behind. There's like this fence, and then you see the tower, and then they both fall off as the show goes off the air. So, and I thought that was a great ending. I thought that was a great ending to SmackDown, and it just kind of gave off this whole vibe, like this is their willing to kill each other type of visual. So, they're really setting the stakes high for their WrestleMania match. So on the March 27th SmackDown, the unsanctioned match is made official, which means that there's no rules. WWE is not responsible, and there's just pure fucking violence and chaos that's going to be occurring at WrestleMania. Um, so, and then on the next after the match is made official on the next SmackDown on April 3rd, we always see this week between Drew and Jacob are these two separate vignettes where Drew is kind of he's referring to Jacob's background, where he was in jail and all this stuff, and he was a criminal, and just he just comes off as very cold and calculated and very vengeful. And whereas we see Jacob's vignette, later in the night, he just his mindset comes across as very unhinged and destructive and just unpredictable. And I gotta be honest, like I'm super super excited for this match. I think it's going to be freaking insane. Um, but it seems like WWE is selling this match as it's not about titles anymore or anything. It's just about survival for one of these guys. And that leads me to this past SmackDown, April the 10th, this past Friday, where Jacob would have a match with Tama Tonga. He would go on to beat Tama Tonga in that match. And then directly after the match, after Jacob is celebrating, Drew comes from the crowd. He attacks Jacob from behind, beats the ever loving shit out of him, handcuffs him, around the ring post, which was very reminiscent to Roman being handcuffed around the ring post during his feud with Baron Corbin that CM Punk alluded to in that pipe bomb this past Monday. But we'll get to that later. But just beyond that, he gets Jacob back in the ring, whips the shit out of him with a belt, and just stands over him as this we go further into this feud into WrestleMania. And we have one more SmackDown left. So this coming Friday, will be the culmination, I'm sure, for all these stories of what the last thing we're going to see for the SmackDown stories going into WrestleMania. So everyone be sure to watch that and just see how this ends going into Mania. Because usually, if you think about it, if you look at the patterns between of WWE in the past, anyone, which with this coming Friday will be the go home show, and anytime there is something that happens in a feud on the go home show, whoever's left standing tall is usually the one that loses at the pay per view or the premium live event or whatever. But I'm hoping if they do something like that, then if someone is left standing tall, that they don't continue with that pattern. That they may swerve us possibly, but regardless, whatever happens, I think the match is going to be fantastic at WrestleMania. So moving on to the next match. Now, I may not have a lot to say about this next match because And this is another opinion, another spoiler that I'll talk about more on Wednesday with John and Mark. But not super excited about this match. I think this match is the least excited that I am about any other match, and that's the WWE Women's Tag Team Championship Fatal 4-Way match. So let's go ahead and talk about the background for this one. So since November of 2025, um, Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair have been kind of locked in this heated rivalry with Nia Jax and Lash Legend. Um, so this feud, it led to this massive, kind of escalation at Survivor Series for the War Games Women's War Game match in 2025. And in this match, Io Sky and Rhea Ripley, inserted themselves into this chaos and just making it clear that the women's tag division was kind of becoming this like battleground or whatever. So at this point, I really found it interesting, because I'm big Rhea Ripley fan, big Io Sky fan. So anything involving them was I'm super interested in. But just one night before the WWE Elimination Chamber, a few months later in 2026, Nia Jax and Lash Legend would defeat Io Sky and Rhea Ripley to capture the WWE Women's Tag Team Championships. Um, so from that moment on, they positioned themselves. Nia Jax and Lash Legend, that is, they positioned themselves as kind of these unstoppable champions. Just using brute force and intimidation to kind of control the division, I guess. Um, so in March of 2026, there's just a total chaos going on in the women's tag division. Just the champions they've attempted to kind of prove dominance by defending against each of these teams individually. That's going to be in this fatal 4-way, being Alexa and Charlotte, Bailey and Lyra, and the Bella Twins. But none of those matches had a clean ending. Every title defense, dissolved into disqualifications or outside interference, or all the teams were brawling with one another. So it became clear to me then that they're definitely not going to do a normal 2-on-2 tag team match at Mania. They're going to have all these teams involved. So on the March 30th episode of Raw, WWE officials, finally stepped in, and the Fatal 4-Way Tag Team Title match was made official for WrestleMania 42. Now, I'll talk about the stakes a little bit here. So the the match, all the teams in the match kind of represent something. Um, so from what I've seen, and this is just my opinion, but like Nia Jax and Lash Legend, they're representing the control of the division. Just that dominance over the women's tag division. And then you got two teams here who represent redemption. Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair, who are just chasing gold again, and then just that redemption for Bailey and Lyra Valkyria, because of last year's WrestleMania. Bailey kind of got screwed out of that. It was supposed to be her and Lyra, fighting for the tag titles last year, but Bailey, of course, got placed by a returning Becky Lynch. So it's kind of redemption for them in a sense there. And then just also for the Bella Twins, I guess it's kind of like a legacy um, versus modern era thing for them, just proving that they still belong. I don't know. I don't really care about the Bellas though, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I'm so disinterested in this match. But that's that, and like I said, I'll talk more about that this Wednesday with John and Mark. But moving on to the next match on the card here. Now, again, just like this last match, uh, may not talk too much about this one either. Um, just another one that I'm not super interested in, and that's the WWE Women's Intercontinental Championship between AJ Lee and Becky Lynch. So AJ, she returned on September 20th, 2025, my wife's birthday of all days. Um, and this was at WrestlePalooza, and she, immediately targets Becky Lynch. Um, so their rivalry, started in this mixed tag match between CM Punk and AJ Lee versus Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch. Husband and wife versus husband and wife. Um, and beyond that, because of course CM Punk and AJ won that match. Um, on later in November, on November 17th, edition of Raw, AJ would cost Becky the Intercontinental Championship by helping Maxine Dupree win. Um, and beyond that, that would lead into Survivor Series War Games, where AJ and Becky would be on opposite sides, and of course AJ and her team would win that War Games. Um, then Becky would regain the Intercontinental Championship on the January 5th Raw against Maxine Dupree. Um, and also, AJ, would go on to fight Becky after that at the Elimination Chamber, and that's where she would defeat Becky for the Women's Intercontinental Championship. So AJ stays undefeated, and it just feels like so. And out of all these matches that AJ's had since her return, so this will WrestleMania 42 will only be her fifth match since her return, and out of these five matches, including the one at WrestleMania 42, uh, four matches involve Becky, and AJ has won every single match she's been in thus far. All the four matches she's already been in, she's won every single one. So WrestleMania feels like Becky's last chance to stop AJ's streak. Um, Again, more on that this Wednesday, but just the key dynamic here, I think, is AJ. She is she's playing mind games with Becky, and just like she's just displaying this almost perfection about her. She's undefeated. Whereas Becky, the dynamic with her is that, she has this sense of pride, and, she feels like that's why she had to have this match again with AJ. And she just has this desperation about her to prove, that she's still the man. Um, so, and through all of this, AJ, even though I don't care for her promos when she's talking on the mic and all that, but she just still the way they're portraying it is like she's very calm, she's calculated, almost untouchable because she has not been defeated since her return. And she knows that she's in Becky's head. And also the way that WWE is portraying where they're having AJ wrestle a lot less by putting her in these matches like Elimination Chamber, and back at War Games, and her return at WrestlePalooza with teaming with her husband Punk, and now this match at Mania. They're just making it feel like more special, like these matches with AJ is a special feel. Um, and honestly, I think that would portray her as more dangerous because Becky is making these more and more appearances. She's wrestling more than what AJ is, so AJ is going to be more, I guess, ready in a sense. But that's not always the case, of course. Because like a lot of people say that the less time that you wrestle, the more ring rust that you gain. So, but with Becky Lynch, it just feels like she's slightly, her that with her character, it's her kind of psyche is unraveling, I guess, and just this feud has cost her everything multiple times now. So it's interesting to see where they go with this at WrestleMania, and the whole outcome with that. But like I said, be sure to tune in this Wednesday for the Road to WrestleMania roundtable with me, John Grande, and Stuntman Mark, where we'll be talking about our opinions on all these matches and giving our predictions. So moving on to the next match. Um, so this is I, this is another match that I wish I could talk more about, but just it only became official in the last couple weeks. So they have a much shorter time to build here with this one, but uh, this one is going to be an interesting one for sure. And that's Seth Rollins versus Gunther. So Seth was injured back on October the 11th, 2025. And, and after his injury, to play into the storyline, um, he was betrayed by the Vision, Braun Breaker and the Vision, and he was removed as a member from the group. Um, Now, fast forward a few months later, Royal Rumble 2026, a masked man comes out and attacks Braun Breaker at the Royal Rumble, um, causing Braun to be kind of like bumfuzzled, and he gets in the ring and he's quickly eliminated by Obafemi. Um, and just following that mysterious attack on Braun at the Royal Rumble, tension started to rise as the Vision was looking for who this masked man was. Um, so Seth Rollins, he remained off camera, for a while here, and just as speculation started regarding his return grew. And as I mentioned earlier, Braun Breaker, who was speculated to be Rollins' WrestleMania opponent, was injured on the Raw after Royal Rumble, February 2nd, 2026. Um, and of course, the stuff I mentioned as well with Bronson Reed, and then at Elimination Chamber 2026, there's a masked man that entered the men's Elimination Chamber and attacked Logan Paul, leading to his elimination, and that attacker amassed himself to be Seth Rollins, just marking his official return to WWE TV. And on the March 2nd Raw, Seth would appear with this whole group of these masked men to just distract the ring area. I guess it was kind of goofy. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, um, and but it left Paul Heyman vulnerable. So Rollins, sees this opportunity to stomp Paul Heyman, to send a clear message to him and the Vision. And on the March 9th Raw, Seth would again emerge, with this group of these masked men to confront the general manager Adam Pearce. So chaos ensued here, between Rollins and the masked men and LA Knight and the Usos and the Vision. And going forward on the March 16th Raw, Paul Heyman retaliated by trying to at least trying to unleash a returning Brock Lesnar on Seth Rollins. Um, and Lesnar got out there, he decimated all these masked uh, people that was that these masked men that was with Seth Rollins, until Obafemi intervened to take out Brock Lesnar, um, and more on that later too as well, because that's another one I'm super excited for is Brock and Oba. But on the March 23rd Raw, Heyman issued this restraining order, against Seth Rollins, and when Rollins defied it by attacking Heyman from behind during the broadcast, he was apprehended, arrested by the Boston police and escorted out of the arena. Um, so on the March 30th Raw, Rollins, was officially cleared to return to action, and he immediately targeted Heyman with a chair. He said all the charges from the Boston police were dropped. So Heyman, you're thinking Heyman's in trouble now. He's in some deep shit, right? So he tries to target Heyman with his chair, but then was just shockingly attacked by Gunther. Just setting this new direction for WrestleMania 42, and then this past Monday on Raw, Rollins came out, he addressed it, and him and Gunther got in this big brawl, and then it just all we see between Heyman and Gunther backstage is like Gunther's just is it's still a mystery why he's teaming up. But I really ultimately it's just because um, of injuries, last minute decisions by the WWE. Um, some disagreements on booking because I know there was like some talk about Gunther and Ray supposed to have a match, but Ray didn't want to do like a retirement thing because he wants to save his last match against Dominic. Um, so they did. They didn't really have anything going for Seth Rollins. They didn't have anything going for Gunther. So it's like, okay, let's put them together. I mean, there's not much of a story there thus far. Um, but I mean, I think it's still going to be a fantastic match at WrestleMania. So right now we're just still trying to figure out. We have Raw tomorrow night, so I'm sure they'll go more into that as well. But right now it's just seeming as if like Gunther's doing this. They're WWE's portraying this as Gunther's doing this because he just wants to get a favor at some point from Paul Heyman, which is really funny. So Paul Heyman's just like owing favors everyone. CM Punk and now Gunther, but yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a fantastic match. But moving on to the next match, and now this match I'm also super excited for. I think this has been a very decent build on this match, and that's the WWE Women's World Championship between Stephanie Vaquer and Liv Morgan. Now, if we go back, you know, Liv Morgan, she won the 2026 Women's Royal Rumble, and February 2026, that rivalry between Liv and Stephanie really started to begin there. Um, so the whole month was just defined by Liv weighing her championship options and just ultimately targeting Stephanie and her world championship for WrestleMania 42. Um, Now, starting on February the 2nd, when Liv, returned to Monday Night Raw to celebrate her Royal Rumble win, and during this Philly street fight where Stephanie defended her title against Raquel Rodriguez, Liv interfered and attacked Stephanie. And she would deliver like the Oblivion to Stephanie, and she stood over the champion, just raising the women's world title just to kind of signal her intent. But then on February 6th, SmackDown, she appeared to scout the WWE Women's Champion, Jade Cargill. Um, Tensions kind of remained high, as Liv would refuse to officially name her WrestleMania opponent, just keeping both these champions on edge, I guess. And then on February the 9th, on Raw, there was this segment between Liv Morgan and Dominic and Stephanie that took place. And Stephanie, she confronted Liv and just kind of certain, I guess, her dominance or whatever as this fearless, fighting champion, and she was just demanding Liv, to make her choice. Um, and that brings me to the February 16th edition of Raw, where Stephanie, delivered this promo, just questioning Liv's work ethic and just comparing, her own difficult path from Chile to Liv's career, and just that the personal nature, of the attack, kind of left Liv visibly shaken, and just and almost like she was crying or whatever. Um, so on February 23rd, the choice is officially made, and Liv, she officially chooses to challenge Stephanie Vaquer for the Women's World Championship at WrestleMania 42. And just once the announcement was made, it quickly turned violent when Liv blindsided Stephanie with a microphone and then she just does another Oblivion just to close out that month. And then that brings us into March of 2026. So the rivalry there between the two just starts to escalate into this series of physical brawls and just and interference as they head toward that match at WrestleMania. Um, so on March the 2nd, just following her decision to challenge Stephanie, Liv appeared on Raw to address her, and she vowed to take everything from Stephanie, just as she had taken from others in the past or whatever. Um, and on March the 9th, during this gauntlet match to determine the number one contender for the women's intercontinental title, um, Liv attempted to interfere and try to help Raquel Rodriguez, but Stephanie comes out. She she stops Liv from being able to interfere, and this allows Io Sky to pin Raquel and advance in that gauntlet match. So here, I think Stephanie sent a clear message that she would not, let Liv Morgan's antics go unchecked. So later that night, um, Stephanie, delivered this promo, where she says, I see more in you than you do. Just attempting, to kind of get into Liv's, head by just acknowledging her talent, but just kind of questioning, like, really where her priorities lie. Um, and then on the March 23rd, Raw, tension started to rise even more when Stephanie would ambush Liv, and I've heard I was talking to several people about this, like they were saying that it's almost like if Stephanie Vaquer is coming off as the heel in this feud going into Mania, but like now that looking back at it now, I just see that she's just trying to keep Liv in check. So because Liv has this ego about her, she thinks she's going to go in this and it's going to be a an easy job. It's going to be an easy day for her to get the women's championship, the women's world championship. So Stephanie's just there, to kind of keep her in check. And like I said, she ambushes, Liv right before, Dominic's match against Penta. Um, so, and then, her and Liv, they just kind of, they get into this very wild brawl. That this kind of spills around the arena and the backstage, and, just leaving Liv, without her, as her usual support for Dominic's match. So the next week on March the 30th, we get the return of Roxanne Perez. So Stephanie, successfully defended her title, against Nikki Bella, who had replaced this uninjured Raquel Rodriguez. And after the match, Liv attacks Stephanie from behind, but the champion quickly comes back and gains the upper hand. And then this kind of very surprise twist. Roxanne returned to help Liv fight off Stephanie, kind of signaling this that reformed alliance within the Judgment Day heading into WrestleMania. Um, so by the time April came around, the rivalry between Liv and Stephanie had reached its peak just during the final, road to WrestleMania episodes of Monday Night Raw, just leading to their match. And on this past Monday's Raw, April the 6th, Stephanie again blindsided Liv while Liv was backstage talking with Roxanne Perez. So, and this, it just and it looked bad, guys. I mean, like when she hits Liv and Liv like basically headbutts Roxanne. I mean, it legit happened, because if you've seen the photos afterwards, the pictures of Liv and Roxanne with the big huge knots on their forehead. I mean, it was so severe that that both of them were from what they've been saying, were placed in concussion protocol. Just 12 days before WrestleMania. So I really hope that Liv is going to be able to make it to WrestleMania at 100% to be in this match, because I really enjoyed this build up. I really have liked everything they've done so far, and can't wait to see what happens. That brings me now to the main event of night one of WrestleMania 42 for the WWE Championship: Cody Rhodes versus Randy Orton. So and this may take me a while because I have a lot to say about this one. So the relationship between Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton is, I think, one of the most storied and layered in modern WWE history. Just it's spanned nearly 2 decades now of of Randy being a mentor, and just there's betrayal there, and just there's all these high stakes going into this match at WrestleMania 42. Um, so if you let's go back all the way to 2007, the early years of Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton. So Cody Rhodes and he made his very first steps in the WWE um, back in 2007, and he was almost immediately linked to Randy Orton in this sense. So on July the 2nd, 2007, Cody made his TV debut on Raw in a backstage segment where Orton slapped the shit out of Dusty Rhodes. And of course, this pissed Cody off. He wanted revenge for this. So 2 weeks later, on July 16th, 2007, Cody wrestled his first WWE televised match, and where he would lose to Randy Orton, after Randy gave him the RKO. So if you fast forward now into a little bit summer of 2007, which I guess July was already in the summer of 2007, but Orton would continue that kind of psychological warfare against Dusty Rhodes, where they would have this Texas bull rope match, where he would end up beating Dusty in that. And funny enough, that ended up being Dusty's last WWE match. I mean, he had one other match after that, like 3 years later in FCW, where he teamed up with Cody and Goldust. And I can't remember who they fought at that, but that FCW match was Dusty's very last match. But this match, this Texas Bull Rope match that he had with Orton, that was his last ever like WWE televised match. And like I said, after Orton, beat Dusty in that match, he delivers this punt kick to Dusty's head, while Cody could just stand there and watch. And after all that with Dusty, and a year later, 2008, it became this if you can't beat them, join them type of situation for Cody, where he would join up with Randy Orton and Ted DiBiase Jr. So these three, they would of course become the faction known as Legacy, where these multi-generational stars, and it's all dominated by Orton's leadership. Um, and that whole legacy era of just dominance and then ultimately dissension around 2010 was I mean, that was a great time for WWE, I felt. And just as Orton's proteges, Cody and Ted Jr., they would help Randy secure multiple WWE championships at this time, and even they Randy would win the 2009 Royal Rumble, during that whole era. Um, but in 2010, like I said, dissension was on its way, and just Orton's frequent, physical and verbal abuse of Cody and Ted Jr. Just it led to this breakdown in the group. Um, and there would be like accidental like interference from Cody and Ted, and they would accidentally cost Orton matches, just and it's kind of led to this. That's what led to the downfall in the group. And at WrestleMania 26, the group just exploded in this triple threat match. So, and despite Cody and Ted Jr. Attempt to double team Randy, in that match, he would still emerge, as the winner, after punting Cody and then hitting the RKO on Ted Jr. Um, so beyond that, after the legacy stuff, for the over the next 5 or 6 years, Cody was going through a character change. He would, do the dashing Cody Rhodes, undashing Cody Rhodes, the Stardust stuff, and there was a few times that Cody and Randy did still they had a couple matches against one of them was when he was doing the undashing Cody Rhodes stuff in 2011. Cody was going through this kind of disfigured persona thing, and he was, and so he feuded a little bit there with Orton, and he actually defeated Randy in a match in September of 2011. After he hit him with his protective mask and everything while the ref was distracted. Um, but then the next time that they would fight would be in 2013, in the where the Cody's career was on the line. So Cody had to basically fight for his job, against Orton, who was at the time the WWE champion. Of course, Cody lost in this kind of firing storyline thing, and then that would lead to Cody's eventual transformation into Stardust. Um, so if fast forward, of course, Cody left after being frustrated with the Stardust shit and just didn't agree with creatively what was they were doing for him. So he left. He kind of went out there on the Indies, reinvented himself. He worked in New Japan and Ring of Honor and TNA and just multiple indie promotions. He went on to help create AEW. He did his time there, and then of course in 2022 he made his return back to WWE. And just and after that 6 year absence from Cody, they would him and Randy would quickly reunite, once again as this kind of mentor student dynamic. So in 2022 they had this 20th anniversary for Randy Orton. WWE was celebrating Orton's 20 years there, and Cody actually comes out, and him and Randy they share this very emotional segment on Raw, and just kind of cementing their friendship. So, and WWE's done a good job on that of really like highlighting the friendship between Cody and Randy over the past few years. But then you go, if you look at the matches that these two have had, so they've only had since Cody's return in 2022, him and Orton have only had two matches where they faced off against one another. And the first one being at Night of Champions 2025, and this is the first time they had faced off in over a decade. So this was the King of the Ring finals, and of course Cody would beat Orton once again and become the 2025 King of the Ring. Now, the other match that they face out what just happened here recently at the Elimination Chamber, the men's Elimination Chamber match, where Orton would end up eliminating Cody last to win the number one contendership for the WWE Championship at WrestleMania. So at this point, Drew McIntyre was the WWE champion. I mean, I think it was set in a lot of people's mind. Okay, they're going to do Randy versus Drew, or they're going to go with the proposed, like rumored match that everybody's been talking about online, the Fatal 4-Way. I mean, what else can they do? I mean, of course, then on the post show of Elimination Chamber, Nick Aldis would make the announcement that Cody would get that title shot on SmackDown against Drew. So, like I said earlier, I was like, okay, that's what they're doing. They're going to have Cody win this. It's going to be Cody and Orton, and that's exactly what I wanted to see. So with Cody winning the championship, on SmackDown, it just it appeared to be that these two now would be heading to this respectful master versus apprentice match, at WrestleMania. So after, like I said, after Cody won the championship, the next week on SmackDown, March the 13th edition of SmackDown, uh, they were set to have this contract signing between Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton for the WWE Championship at WrestleMania 42. So, and of course, as you know, contract signings at WWE, um, they never go well in the end. So this is where we've seen Orton turn heel for the first time in years, and delivering, a kicks Cody right in the nuts and just unleashes this brutal, bloody attack on Cody. He has him laying on the steel ring steps and he just absolutely beats the fucking shit out of him. Like no joke. Um, and then after that, Cody's gone for a few weeks, and then Orton is doing like this kind of this small program while Cody's gone with Matt Cardona, and the when they first have the interaction backstage, and like Cardona like approaches Randy and he says like what are you doing, all this stuff, and just or Orton is just an absolute savage on Cardona. It's like, don't you have to be somewhere playing with action figures, you mark ass stooge, indie nerd? And to me, that's the best insult that I've heard in wrestling in a long time. Is a mark ass stooge, indie nerd. I love that. Um, but beyond that, Cody would make his return and everything. And in April of 2026, and I forgot to mention, over the past couple weeks that Cody was gone, they would show these segments with Orton, or he's on the phone with somebody. You're like, who's he on the phone with? Whatever. And then in April 2026, it was revealed who Randy was on the phone with when Pat McAfee, I mean, of all people, Pat McAfee, came in, joins Randy Orton to launch this, all out assault on Cody and just the current state of WWE. Pat comes in, claims that the business is soft under Cody's leadership, and Pat has used his appearances on to SmackDown to position himself as this agent of change, just kind of tasked with motivating Orton to become a 15-time world champion. Um, and like I said, it's crazy to me. Like after weeks, you see Orton being on the phone with this mystery advisor. It's Pat McAfee uh, to come in and help take down Cody Rhodes. Um, so after McAfee shows up, he also kicks Cody in the nuts. Cody, I don't know, he's been kicked in the nuts a lot here the past couple of years. It's weird. It's almost like a fetish for him at this point. But anyway, after that, that he kicks him in the nuts, and then they Orton's like holding him down with a chair, and they beat the shit out of him. McAfee he releases this huge promo about like um, talking about the Attitude Era, and just saying that the current state of WWE is ass, and just and just that he can't understand why there's tickets still available when Randy Orton is going to be at WrestleMania, and he's basically just jerking Randy off at this point of everything he's saying. Um, but the mission here, I think, was he stated that his goal was to motivate this 6'5" monster to lead the company, and telling Randy he needed to kill everything and save the business, and just called saying the business had become shit and disgusting under Cody Rhodes' leadership. And I think the ultimatum here, is to fall in the show, you know, um, or actually, no, I'll get to that in just a moment, because he didn't state that at this point. That was this past Friday, but so let's talk about this past Friday. So on the April 10th, 2026 edition of SmackDown, and I hate being right sometimes, guys. I hate being right, because I knew uh, with all the involvement here lately over the past few months and the past year, really, with Jelly Roll and his friendship with Randy Orton, and just I and then they did something like a few weeks ago where Jelly got involved with Cody and Randy, and Jelly got like attacked or whatever. But I knew they were going to involve him somehow in this match, and like I said, I hate being right sometimes, guys, and um, so they touched more on that this past Friday on SmackDown when Pat McAfee, he came in, he doubled down on his heel turn, and which he called, which they were in San Jose, California, and which he calls a shithole. Um, and when he first gets there, he's highly disrespectful to the general manager Nick Aldis. He's just tossing his truck keys to him and stuff, tells him to park his truck. Um, and then he's confronted by Jelly Roll, who pushes Pat into a wall after Pat kind of mocked Jelly Roll's status as this outsider or whatever. Um, and then Pat comes out to the ring and he gives his response to what CM Punk said this past Monday on Raw, which we'll get into a little bit later. But so in the ring, Pat McAfee, he's addressing CM Punk. Where Punk had called him Pat McAfee, and so he mocks Punk, saying he's a bitch and who wears licensed merchandise while taking TKO checks, just contrasting himself as this real agent of change or whatever. And then the next thing that happens is so bizarre because it comes off as this like heroic gesture or whatever, but Pat announces that he would pay 25% of the cost of Saturday night WrestleMania tickets to ensure that people could see Randy Orton win his 15th world championship, and then in that same sentence, he says, don't worry about Sunday night because that whole card is ass or whatever. Um, but, Cody would eventually confront him, saying to Pat, call him a play wrestler and and then of course Orton would appear on the big screen to reveal that he had beaten the shit out of Jelly Roll again, and he was going to like drag him out there just to bait Cody into another attack. So as he's pulling him out there, here comes McAfee. He's trying to sneak up on Cody. Cody goes after McAfee. Randy comes back, attacks Cody. Again, they beat the shit out of him once again, and then they steal the WWE Championship belt and they leave the arena in Pat's truck. Um, and that's the last thing we've seen regarding this feud going into WrestleMania. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they end this on the Go Home show this Friday on SmackDown, going into WrestleMania. So, and I'm excited, but also I'm not really excited because of the Pat McAfee and Jelly Roll stuff. But I mean, whatever, it is what it is. Um, but now we move on. Well, actually, before we get into night two, let's see here. See, we got a comment in the chat from Hardcore Wrestling Collector Don Packard. Just had him on the How I Got Into Wrestling show not too long ago. He says that he retracts what he said on the Liv and Stephanie Vakir. I'm actually excited for that match now between. Yeah, man. Like, I am excited for that match at this point, and like I said, I don't want to give too much of my opinion on it right now. I want to save that for the show on Wednesday. So be sure to check that out, man. If you got time on Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern time, here on the CraterMania channel, be sure to watch that show, and we'll give our full opinions and predictions on all those matches that night. But now we move on to night two of WrestleMania. And again, WWE announced the first hour for both nights of WrestleMania, and for this night, they have listed Brock Lesnar and versus Obafemi, and also the 6-man Intercontinental Championship ladder match. So don't know which one they're going to open with, but I'm going to assume they're going to open with Brock and Oba. So we're going to talk about that one first. Um, so the rivalry between Brock Lesnar and Obafemi is defined by this kind of collision of behemoths that began at the start of 2026 and just has escalated up now into one of WWE's most prominent non-title programs going into WrestleMania 42. Um, so let's start with, you know, January 31st, 2026, the Royal Rumble. So after vacating his NXT championship, Obafemi made his official main roster debut as the number one entrant in the 2026 Royal Rumble. And he dominated early on, eliminating five different superstars, including Braun Breaker and Solo Sikoa. But his night in the Royal Rumble would end once a returning Brock Lesnar came into the match, eliminates him, and just that establishes this immediate grudge between the two. Um, so in February of 2026, Obafemi officially signed with the main roster as this free agent sought out by both the Raw and the SmackDown brands. Um, he began this kind of transition to this powerhouse baby face, securing all these wins over names like the Miz and Rusev, and um, even had I think he had a segment with Kit Wilson at one point. But on the February 23rd Monday Night Raw, Paul Heyman comes out and he issues this open challenge for Brock Lesnar for WrestleMania 42. Um, so Heyman, he challenges the locker room to face the Beast incarnate, at the upcoming WrestleMania. Noting that Lesnar would appear on several of these dates, these in Raw episodes, leading up to WrestleMania to hear a challenge. And on the March 16th Monday Night Raw, during this segment featuring Seth Rollins, that I spoke about earlier, and Lesnar coming out on him, Obafemi interrupts and he just shocks the audience by leveling Brock Lesnar with that fall from grace powerbomb. I mean, he got that boy up big time. I mean, it was crazy. I was like, that popped me big time. I thought it was an awesome moment. And so, of course, with that, he accepted Brock Lesnar's WrestleMania Open Challenge. Um, and on the March 23rd Monday Night Raw, despite Heyman's public dismissal of Obafemi as this fluke, um, Oba would once again physically dominate Brock for the second consecutive week, just asserting his role as you know the ruler. And um, to follow up on that, on the March 30th Monday Night Raw, the WWE chief content officer, we have to address him in that sense. The chief content officer, Triple H, he attempted to kind of get in between and I guess mediate the tension here. So and the segment ends with both these men just nearly destroying everything around the ring and the set and the security and these WWE officials are all like struggling to keep them apart. Um, and that leads also to another chaotic scene on April the 6th, Monday Night Raw. Of course, they're going to have another formal contract signing here, which, like I said, WWE contract signings never go well. And of course, this one also ended in this massive brawl. And even after the show went off the air, and the two of them continued fighting, just throwing ring steps and tables and just shit's flying everywhere. So this is, I think, was one of the most anticipated matches for WrestleMania for a lot of people because it comes across as they're establishing this new dominant monster in Obafemi, and what better way to like get him over and see him as the potential future of the WWE than taking out the monster that has existed for the past 20 years or so in WWE in Brock Lesnar. And I think Brock is, time is almost up. I think he's on like this run he's on in WWE right now. I think is going to be his final run. So I mean, it's kind of a passing of the torch thing, I think, with Obafemi, and I will be shocked if Brock wins at WrestleMania. Um, so I'll just leave it at that. But going into the next match now, this is the second match that will be aired, I guess, on ESPN2 in the first hour of night two, and that's the WWE Intercontinental Championship ladder match between Penta, Rey Mysterio, Dragon Lee, Javon Evans, Rusev, and JD McDonough. So, don't have a whole lot to say in regards to the buildup on this match because there was almost zero. Well, I mean, there pretty much was zero buildup for this match. Um, but I'll do my best to try to talk about it. So, um, I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be an awesome match. I think there's going to be a lot of like cool stuff going on in this match. And just to begin, back on March the 2nd, I guess we could start there. Penta, won the Intercontinental Championship by defeating Dominic, on Monday Night Raw in Indianapolis. And at the end of the month, after Penta won the championship, he was doing like different matches and stuff, but there was nothing really building towards WrestleMania for him until the March 30th Raw, when after he had his match, he officially announced that the Intercontinental Championship would be defended in a multi-man ladder match at WrestleMania 42. So, and once this was announced, Michael Cole made a comment on commentary saying that there were qualifying matches on main event, um, which is not true. Which I didn't see any evidence of that at all. I couldn't find any evidence that there were qualifying matches because once Penta announced the match on Raw, I mean, they showed a graphic for WrestleMania 42 with Penta, Javon Evans, Dragon Lee, Rusev, and JD McDonough. So when it was first announced, it was just a five. It was five men in this match. So I don't know what they were talking about when it comes to the qualifying matches because this match was just thrown together last minute. I mean, it's going to be a cool match. I think it's going to be really fun, really some really cool spots, but there's been absolutely no build up for this. And then April 6th, Rey Mysterio returns to Raw and announces his entry into the match. So now it's a 6-man ladder match. And I think when Ray returned and announced his entry into the match, it confused a lot of people because there was this talk online about, Gunther and Ray supposed to have a match at WrestleMania, but what it came down to, because I think Ray did an interview or something, and he just, he declared that he wasn't interested in that match with Gunther as a career-ending match or whatever, because he wants to be his last match to be against his son Dominic, which I understand, and I'm glad that Ray stood his ground on that because that's. I think that would be that's the perfect way for Ray to end his career is in a match against Dominic. But later that night, after Ray had announced his entry into the match, Penta, Javon Evans, and Dragon Lee, they teamed up to beat Los Americanos in this 6-man tag team kind of like preview match. So beyond that, I mean, like, there was a AAA event last night, and Penta defended the Intercontinental Championship against Vikingo. And Penta did win the match, but I was honestly expecting Vikingo to win last night and then have and WWE would have him added to that ladder match at WrestleMania. Because I mean, if you guys aren't watching AAA, you haven't seen Vikingo, highly recommend it. That if you like really cool like high flying spots and just like a lot of super cool like flippy moves and stuff, which I know a lot of people complain about, high spots and flippy moves and all this shit, but I I don't care. I mean, I like that stuff. I think it looks cool. Um, and I mean, that was one of the biggest reasons why I love the cruiserweight division back in WCW in the 90s. So, I mean, so my priorities with that hasn't, or my feelings on that hasn't changed any since in 30 years. But so I'm always going to love that stuff. If it looks cool to me, I'm going to love it. But anyway, like I said, I'm so shocked I didn't add him to the match. But once they do have him doing some stuff within WWE outside of AAA, if you've not seen his stuff yet, it's interesting what where they go with his career. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. That's all I can say about the six pack ladder match. Um, because like I said, there's really been no build. It was kind of thrown together last minute, but I'm still looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a really cool match. So that's that. And then moving on to the next match. So this next match, I think, could end up being one of the best matches for WrestleMania. And sadly, it seems like there's a lot of the fan base, the WWE fan base, um, are either against this match, they don't care about it, um, they disagree with the booking of the champion going into the match. Um, I don't know. I mean, I like both of these guys. I think they're both amazing workers. One of these guys I've been a fan of for close to 20 years now. And this is the WWE United States Championship, Sami Zayn versus Trick Williams. Um, like I said, I think this is going to be one of the best in ring contested matches at Mania. Um, so I really think people are, that's not looking forward to this match are going to be pleasantly surprised. Because you see, the rivalry between Sami Zayn and Trick Williams has kind of evolved from this, simple respect based tension into a kind of deeply personal conflict involving the championship. Um, and then there's also like celebrity involvement with this match, and following Trick's debut on January the 2nd, just these two guys, Sammy and Trick, have just kind of been on this kind of collision course, for the United States Championship. It didn't seem like that way for a while because with Carmelo Hayes, and we'll get into that in just a minute, but but it kind of makes sense, guys. And let me start by saying, when Trick Williams he made his official debut on SmackDown. He interrupted Sami Zayn. This was on January the 2nd of 2026 when Trick made his main roster debut. He interrupts Sami Zayn in the process, just stating that he will achieve in months what took Sami Zayn 20 years to accomplish. So the next week, Trick, has his very first main roster match against Ray Phoenix, and he beats him. And I'll say that, there's an interesting stat. Since Trick has debuted on SmackDown, he has not lost a single match that he's had on SmackDown. Now, while he did lose at Saturday Night's Main Event, he lost at Elimination Chamber. He has still not lost a single match on SmackDown. But with this first match that he had, against Ray Phoenix and his victory against him, it just proved that his in ring prowess, to this kind of skeptical Sami Zayn that was watching from backstage. And then the next week on January 16th, Trick he would I'm sorry, Sammy would defeat Ilja Dragunov in this qualifying match to advance to this this high stakes fatal four way at Saturday night's main event. And on at Saturday night's main event on January 24th, this was in Montreal. So I mean, Sammy had like home field advantage. He wins the fatal four way match against Randy Orton, Damian Priest, and Trick Williams. He officially becomes the number one contender for the WWE Championship. Um, and at the Royal Rumble, Sammy would take on Drew McIntyre, for the WWE title. And despite a great performance, I thought that match was great. Sammy even hits a haluva kick, that almost got him the win, but he ends up losing to Drew after Drew hits the two claymores on Sammy. So following that loss, at the Rumble, Sammy is kind of stuck in this like with this frustration of like, he's trying to figure out how he's going to get his spot at WrestleMania. So it kind of leads back into this rivalry again with Trick Williams. Um, and on the February 20th, edition of uh of SmackDown, you know, Trick qualifies for the Elimination Chamber, just kind of further elevating his status, while Sammy fails to qualify in his match. And so, again, he's still struggling with finding his place, going into WrestleMania. And then also now, like, Sammy's starting to kind of deal with all this fan backlash as well. Um, so Sammy so frustrated. He's not sure what he's going to do. So on the next week, on March 27th, um, he does the United States title open challenge, where he challenges Carmelo Hayes for the title, and Sammy ends up winning the title. Now I think this is where people really started turning on Sammy, because he beat Carmelo Hayes, and Carmelo Hayes has really established himself as a great United States champion over the past couple months. And I think people were, under impression like, well, if Sammy won the title, they're going to add Carmelo to it. It's going to be a triple threat. Um, I just I disagree with that here because, um, first of all, I've watched Trick and Carmelo both in NXT. They went from a team to having a great rivalry in NXT. And then, Carmelo, of course, went to the main roster before Trick did. Now Trick is there. I feel like they're going to have a great rivalry at some point, but now is not that time. I mean, I just don't think, um, it's right. I don't think Carmelo deserves that to be placed last minute in this feud between Trick and Sammy as like a third wheel, at WrestleMania. I feel like he deserves to have a more a longer feud and just a one-on-one feud with Trick, and instead of just being just this guy who's plunged into a triple threat match at WrestleMania for the title just because he lost the title to Sammy. I mean, it's just, this match between Sammy and Trick, for the U.S. title at WrestleMania is just something that they're just, capitalizing on because that they've had this feud going since January, pretty much. So after Sammy wins the title, he's backstage and, Trick makes this comment or whatever to Sammy saying that, he was booked for WrestleMania 42, while Sammy originally was not, before he won the U.S. title. So this kind of sets Sammy off, like, because Sammy's like, takes offense to that because it's like he had to go and win this U.S. title to secure a spot on Mania when Trick didn't really have to do anything. Um, so and it just ignites that feud even more. And then going into the April 3rd edition of SmackDown, um, you know, Sammy has another match against Carmelo Hayes. Sammy retains once again. Um, Sammy is getting booed even more by the crowd here. They're turning on him, and he's at this point he's questioning it, like why am I being booed? What have I done? Um, and after he retains against Carmelo on the April 3rd SmackDown, here comes Trick Williams and Little Yachty to ambush Sammy. Um, and so Little Yachty gets physical, helps Trick, deliver the trick shot, to Sammy, and in the next week, which is this past Friday on SmackDown on the 10th of April, Sammy retaliated, against Little Yachty by giving him a haluva kick, during the match between Trick Williams and Matt Cardona. But despite that distraction, Trick would still defeat Cardona, and that's pretty much the last thing we've seen between Sammy and Trick. So again, Sammy is going into this as a baby face, but the crowd is treating him as a heel, and I mean they're treating the heel Trick as a baby face. So there's been reports, that there could be a potential double turn, that Trick will go all out baby face at WrestleMania. Sammy will be an all out heel once again. So I mean, it would be the smart thing to do at this point, I guess, um, based on how the crowds are reacting to these guys. Um, but I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see what happens. But I'm excited for this match nonetheless. I think it's going to be a great match. Um, so the next match we have here is the WWE Women's Championship between Jade Cargill and Rhea Ripley. So since February the 27th of 2026, Rhea shifted from the tag team division, back to the solo competition. When after her and Io lost the titles on the SmackDown before Elimination Chamber to Nia Jax and Lash Legend, she would go on the next night at Elimination Chamber and win the women's Elimination Chamber match to become the number one contender for the WWE Women's Championship at WrestleMania. Um, so, like I said, on that SmackDown in Louisville, Kentucky, of all places, when Rio would lose the tag championships to Nia Jax and Lash Legend, just that the finish came after this distraction allowed Lash to hit the Lash extension on Rhea for the pin. Um, but as I said, as Elimination Chamber, Rhea would outlast all the other women in that match to become the number one contender. She won by last pinning Tiffany Stratton, and just kind of set her sights on Jade Cargill for WrestleMania. On the March 2nd edition of Raw, um, Rhea would come out and officially announce that her and Io Sky would no longer compete as a tag team at this time. As Rhea was shifting her full focus on Jade and WrestleMania. Um, so the first official face-off between Rhea and Jade came on the March 6th edition of SmackDown. So they were in the ring with one another, and the whole segment just featured this kind of heated exchange where Jade was just mocking Rhea's recent tag team failures, and Rhea promised that she would take that title, that Jade had defended, sparingly. So just kind of mocking Jade, Rhea mocking Jade because she's not really been, defending the title, as much after winning it. But the the turning point kind of came on March the 20th of 2026 when Jade would form this faction going into WrestleMania against Rhea. So the rivalry kind of turned into this numbers game. When Jade would form this new alliance with Michin and BFAB. So this trio now, they would just they would ambush Rhea backstage and just, just establish themselves as this kind of dominant faction, in the women's division going into WrestleMania. And on the March 27th edition, of SmackDown, just there was a singles match between Rhea and BFAB, and so Jade and Michin, they would interfere to kind of just cause this 3-on-1 beat down on Rhea, and then later that night, um, Rhea just called out the group, demanding a fight, and on the April 3rd edition of um, of SmackDown. God, I had a brain fart there for a second. But Rhea defeated Michin in singles action, but was again targeted for this post match attack from Jade and all of them. But Io would return to save Rhea, and using just drop kicks to kind of clear the ring, and and reforming her alliance with Mommy. And this past Monday on Raw, on April the 6th, there was the kendo stick assault on Io Sky. So Rhea and Io, they teamed up to defeat BFAB and Michin on Raw. And then, but after the fact, Jade comes out, and brutalizes Io Sky with this kendo stick while Michin and BFAB are holding Rhea back, just forcing her to watch, Io get her fucking ass beat with a kendo stick. And then this past Friday on SmackDown, it was just the final confrontation before the go home show this coming Friday. In the main event, Jade would fight Io Sky. Now, Jade, attempted to crush Io's arm with a steel chair, but Rhea, would rush the ring, make the save, just leading to this kind of final standoff. As Jade, left the ring and they're locked eyes with Rhea. So, and that's the last thing we've seen in this feud between those two. It's interesting to see what they do in this match, how Io is going to be involved. It's crazy enough to me that Io Sky does not even have a WrestleMania match um, this year. I mean, she's, to me, probably like the most talented women's wrestler in the WWE right now. I mean, she had possibly the match of the year last year. Against Rhea and Bianca Belair. I mean, she just continues to have these banger matches, man. Like she's great, and I know she's my buddy John Grande's favorite wrestler in the world. So, and with good reason. So it's insane that she's kind of being looked at as a side character, I guess, this year, and not having a match of her own. And it kind of makes me wonder if like she's kind of more fucked up than we think she is, after she did like that suicide dive a few weeks ago on Asuka, and she hit it wrong and came down like right on top of her head outside the ring. So I don't know if that's a factor that's playing into why she doesn't have a match now. Um, because it looked like there for a while they were kind of doing this program between her and Asuka, and like Kairi Sane being in the middle of all of it. But I don't know. I really don't know what they're doing at this point with her. So I guess we shall see. But that now brings me to the next match, which is another. This is one of the matches that I'm like most excited for, honestly. And that's Finn Balor versus Dominic Mysterio. So I'm going to kind of dive into the history here between these two a little bit, um, you know, because this relationship between Finn Balor and Dominic Mysterio transitioned from a mentor protege type situation, um, to this bitter rivalry. and resulted in their this match that's going to be occurring at WrestleMania now. So to go back to the beginning of all of this, um, back in 2022, following Finn Balor's, takeover as leader of the Judgment Day in June 2022, um, the group at the time was relentlessly targeting Dominic Mysterio and trying to break him away from his father, Rey Mysterio. Um, and on July the 30th, 2022, at SummerSlam, Balor and Damian Priest they lost to Ray and Dominic at SummerSlam. Um, but just a couple months later, on September the 3rd, at Clash of the Castle of 2022, Dominic would eventually turn heel by attacking Ray and Edge and joining the Judgment Day. Well, not officially, but on that September 5th edition of Raw, Dominic would officially join the Judgment Day, align himself with Finn Balor and Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley, um, and and then the group would even grow from there. But so this whole alliance and this mentor era for Dominic and Balor, he because Balor, he served as as that primary mentor to Dirty Dom, with the two of them, often teaming together and supporting each other's title pursuits. And in July of 2023, Balor would help Dominic win his first NXT North American Championship. Um, and just a little over a year later, in August of 2024, after Balor had betrayed Damian Priest and Dominic had betrayed Rhea at SummerSlam, Balor and Dom they formed this new, more exclusive like version of the Judgment Day, with Liv Morgan. Um, and just a couple months beyond that, in November of 2024, uh, is where these minor cracks started to kind of appear within the Judgment Day and the relationship between Balor and Dominic, because Balor would publicly scold Dominic for being a bad teammate during a match. Um, so there's tension was starting to build here, and that power dynamic going into 2025 started to shift. As Dominic would become a double champion during 2025, holding the AAA Mega Championship and the Intercontinental Championship simultaneously. And so, and that kind of started back, on March the 10th of 2020, before WrestleMania. Dominic had helped Finn Balor, secure this Intercontinental Championship match, against Braun Breaker. But, Balor felt that Dominic was kind of patronizing him a bit. So that would develop going into April of that year at WrestleMania 41. That would develop into a fatal four-way match between Dominic, um, Finn Balor, Braun Breaker, and Penta. And Dominic would end up winning the Intercontinental Championship in that match at WrestleMania 41 by pinning Finn Balor in the match. Um, so within the next month, after after Dominic had won the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania, tensions start to grow more and more between Balor and Dominic, and just Balor starts to have this kind of hesitation during his matches, and that frustrates Dominic, and who has now kind of viewed himself with all the success he's had. He kind of views himself as the leader of Judgment Day, and that kind of pisses Balor off. So in June of 2025, Roxanne Perez is brought in as this member of Judgment Day by Finn Balor to replace Liv Morgan during her injury, and so they have her come in as to replace Liv as one half of the women's tag team champions with Raquel Rodriguez. Now, the rest of the group is hesitant to have her as a member at first, but they quickly kind of warm up to her, and especially Dom, much to Finn Balor's delight. And between July and November of 2025, in Liv's absence, several segments are shown during this time of between Dom and Roxanne in this kind of potential, love angle storyline. Um, and during this time, she gives Dom things that he particularly likes, as gifts, and there's a sense of flirting going on, and also during these segments you can always catch Finn Balor's um his reactions as his eyes light up and he's smiling and as if it's part of some plan that he's created against Dom. And despite all that, Roxanne addresses the rumors and says that her and Dom are just friends or whatever. Um so this angle kind of starts to disappear, strangely enough, around November, right before Liv's return at Survivor Series 2025. Um, so in November of 2025, starting on November the 10th, and this was during John Cena's final run. So, and of course, the only title that had eluded John Cena was the Intercontinental Championship. So he had the match against Dominic on the November 10th, 2025 edition of Raw, uh, and Dominic would lose the title to Cena. Um, but and this match, it ended Dominic's 204 day reign, which began at WrestleMania 41, and it marked Cena's first Intercontinental Championship win. Well, only Intercontinental Championship win at this point now. Um, but Dominic would later regain the Intercontinental Championship from Cena at Survivor Series on November 29th, when Liv Morgan returned and assisted Dom, with the win. And again, she kicked Cena in the nuts. And there's a lot of kicking in the nuts here in WWE the past couple of years. I'm not gonna lie, but after Dominic wins the championship back, going into the beginning of the year of 2026, uh, Finn was starting to transition back into this kind of singles action, specifically for the World Heavyweight Championship, because I think there was he was seeing all the success that Dominic was having, and they were, and the rest of Judgment Day were kind of questioning that, like, oh, you'll find your place, Finn, you'll find your place, whatever, you'll get it, you'll get your gold. So, and he kind of went for that, and I guess he took that personal or whatever, and the character took that personal, um, and so he starts, kind of this feud with CM Punk, so he confronted, CM Punk on the January 12th edition of Raw, and this would spark this kind of high profile series of matches for Finn Balor. Whereas in January 19th at the Raw in Belfast, Ireland, this was Balor's first 2026 title challenge, and it took place in his home territory of Ireland. But and this was a great match. That Punk and Balor match in Ireland was fucking great. And just, despite a strong performance, though, Balor did lose the match. Now, uh, on the February 9th edition of Raw, after being denied into the Royal Rumble, which was took a couple weeks before this, Balor attacked CM Punk again to demand another shot at the title, and it led Adam Pearce to schedule this rematch for the title at Elimination Chamber. Now, I think it's on February 18th, 2026. It's I feel it's interesting to note that Roxanne Perez had to miss some time because she had to have surgery for this tumor in her back. And I'll touch more on that in just a minute. You'll understand why I think it's interesting to know. But on February 28th at the Elimination Chamber, Balor challenged for the title again in Chicago against CM Punk, and unfortunately was once again defeated. So, and while Finn was still technically associated with the Judgment Day during these matches, he was kind of often seen operating independently or leaving the group in like the backstage area to compete solo. So it was kind of the early signals that we were going to see Finn starting to turn face again. Um, and then on the March 2nd, uh, Monday Night Raw, um, Dominic lost his Intercontinental title to Penta, which he blamed. Excuse me. He blamed on Balor's kind of lack of support because Balor refused to help Dom cheat in that match. Now, and then beyond that, so in the next week, the fallout of Dom losing the Intercontinental Championship the week prior, on March 9th, Monday Night Raw, um, the Judgment Day were in the ring with Finn, and and Finn gets in this argument with Dominic, and so it leads to the Judgment Day just brutally attacking Balor. JD, he delivers this a clothesline to Finn, who's like his JD's like former mentor as well, and then Dominic leads this 4-on-1 assault to kick Balor out of the group. Now, going back to Roxanne, I think it's interesting to note that she was not present for this moment. So again, I'll touch on that again in just a moment. So, moving on to the March 23rd, 2026, um, a vengeful Balor. He cost Dominic his chance to regain the title from Penta, and it leads to this all-out brawl. And then the next week on the 30th of March, Roxanne Perez returns to help Liv Morgan in her feud against Stephanie Vaquer. And you're probably asking, but you're talking about Dominic and Finn Balor. What does Roxanne Perez and Stephanie Vaquer and Liv Morgan have to do with those two? Again, I'll get to that in just a minute. So on the April 6th, 2026 Raw, which is this past Monday, backstage, we see Liv and Roxanne having this conversation about how Finn was the one who brought her into Judgment Day. And before Roxanne can say anything about it, Liv and Roxanne are ambushed by Stephanie Vaquer. And, the rest is history with that. I spoke about that earlier, they collided heads and everything and had the big bumps on their foreheads. So, and the reason I bring all that up, I'll talk more about this on Wednesday with John and Mark, but there's a reason why, all of this is occurring. Why that was, she mentioned Finn, and before Roxanne could say anything, they were attacked. So I don't know. Like I said, I'll talk more about that on Wednesday, and I'm kind of really excited to talk about that. But anyway, later on that same Raw, Balor, would officially challenge Dominic to a match at WrestleMania 14, warning that he would bring back the Demon. So to hype this matchup even more, we're finally getting the Demon side of Finn Balor back, and what better way to bring it back than at WrestleMania? I think a lot of people were expecting him to bring it back during the feud with CM Punk this year, but I think this is the perfect. If they're bringing the Demon back, this is the perfect way to bring back against Dominic Mysterio, and I love Dom, but I can't. And I love. He's so good with his character, and I cannot wait to see the fear in Dom's eyes at WrestleMania. It's going to be awesome. But now that brings me now to the very last match of WrestleMania, the main event of night two. And again, this is one of those most anticipated matches on the entire card. Um, I mean, I think it's been great from the get go since they started after Rumble this year. But if I wasn't excited for WrestleMania already, then this past Monday just put that on a whole nother level after that pipe bomb 2.0 from CM Punk. And we'll get into that in just in a bit. But what I want to do with to talk about this last match is to just kind of go over the history between these two, dating back to 2012. Um, and I think this is going to be a fun one, guys. So let's get into it. So, the history between CM Punk and Roman Reigns is one of, I think, WWE's most storied rivalries, when it comes to modern wrestling, at least. Just spanning over a decade now and just, evolving from a mentor like figures to just these fierce rivals going into WrestleMania 42. So if you look at the early history, with the Shield stuff, the debut of Roman Reigns and the Shield, Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, they made their WWE main roster debut at Survivor Series 2012, as a part of the Shield. Um, to help CM Punk retain his WWE Championship against John Cena and Ryback. Um, and the idea behind the Shield, in later years, CM Punk claimed, that the Shield was his original idea, and pitched to WWE management as this kind of group of mercenaries to protect him. He stated that he initially wanted Cassius Ohno or Chris Hero, in the group, but WWE wanted this, the pretty guy, as Punk puts it. They wanted their guy, this guy that they wanted to manufacture into becoming a star, in Roman Reigns instead. Um, and as the Shield transitioned away, from being Punk's protectors, they eventually would feud with him before Punk would end up leaving the WWE. And this culminated in this 3-on-1 handicap match at TLC 2013, which Punk won, by the way. Uh, but the only televised one-on-one match between CM Punk and Roman Reigns took place on January the 6th, 2014, on the old school Raw, where Reigns would end up defeating Punk. And so that was their only one-on-one match that they had, before Punk left, because, later that month was the Royal Rumble, and the Royal Rumble 2014 would be Punk's very last match in the WWE. And then he would just, take his frustrations and his FU money and leave. So during the departure of him, Punk would, as a lot of fans know, go on to Colt Cabana's Art of Wrestling podcast, and he would talk about how he walked out of WWE, following the Royal Rumble, and just due to just these mounting medical issues and creative frustrations and just a lack of respect, in his opinion. Um, he was officially fired on his wedding day in June of that year. And then in November of 2014, he would Punk would appear on that podcast, just to kind of break his silence on everything. I think his most impactful comment regarding Roman Reigns during that podcast was just the directive from WWE officials to make Roman look strong. Um, and Punk, he clarified that while he didn't mind helping Roman, just the constant reminders from multiple producers just really became this source of frustration and was really like pissing him off, I guess. But that this phrase from Punk, it followed Roman for years. Just fueling this kind of fan perception that he was, this corporate chosen star, and leading to just significant crowd backlash just during his early singles push. Um, but Roman, he really rose to the top, man, in Punk's absence, between 2014 and 2023. And because while Punk was away, from professional wrestling, Roman just became just the face of WWE. He became the big dog. WWE pushed him as their top heroic character. Just he won the 2015 Royal Rumble and multiple world titles. He often faced kind of mixed or negative crowd reactions, but he would become the tribal chief, man. In 2020, he underwent this complete character transformation into this dominant villain, leading the bloodline. He held the undisputed WWE Universal Championship for over 1,300 days. I believe it was 1,316 days, if I'm not mistaken. One of the longest reigns in history. I think it's like the fourth longest reign in history, if I'm not mistaken. Um, but then you have CM Punk's return in 2023, after nearly 10 years away from WWE, and you had the stint in AEW, of course, but, whatever. Crimea River. CM Punk made a shocking return at Survivor Series War Games 2023 in Chicago, his hometown. And this return was kept highly secret, involving just this private meeting with Triple H just to, clear the air just days prior. Um, and and just since his return, just the tension between Punk and Roman has kind of been this focal point, of WWE programming. Um, if you look at Survivor Series 2024, a year after Punk returned to the company, uh, there's this rare moment of cooperation that where Punk and Reigns are forced to team up, as a part of this War Games match. Um, and then also this kind of major April 2025 storyline. Um, Paul Heyman, he fulfilled this kind of long-standing promise to CM Punk by taking the favor that he owed to Punk by being in his corner for the WrestleMania 41 main event in the triple threat match against Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. And as much as Roman was tried to get Heyman to not be in his corner, Heyman had to do it. Like Heyman had to do it, and so it started kind of having this kind of awkward tension between Paul Heyman and Roman Reigns. And then, of course, to explain the favor, Paul Heyman agreed to act as CM Punk's wise man once again. Providing his kind of advocacy in that main event of WrestleMania 41 for Punk. And just the whole significance of it is that this fulfilled this very deep personal promise between these two close friends. Um, Punk had noted that without Heyman, that he might not have returned to WWE. And just this favor, helped guarantee him a premier spot. Um, Now, despite being, Roman's manager, Heyman was unable to say no to Punk. And it just caused this kind of significant, tension with Roman. Um, and when it came to WrestleMania 41, and Punk and Reigns, they faced off in this awesome triple threat match, with Seth Rollins. And in the end, Paul Heyman betrays both Punk and Roman during the match and aligns with Rollins. Um, Now, the next thing that happens between Punk and Roman doesn't come until Survivor Series 2025 when Punk and Roman once again team up as part of this War Games match. And this time it's against a common enemy, in Paul Heyman and the Vision. Um, by this point, Seth Rollins is out of the Vision. So, Punk doesn't have any kind of um, anything to do with Rollins in this match, but Roman's on his side. They're using this as you know like to kind of come together, align just as against this common enemy in Paul Heyman, and this group that he represents. But after the match, it was clear that Roman had his sights set on championship gold yet again. But who was it against? I mean, he has this like face to face confrontation with Cody at the end of that match, and it makes you think like, well, is Roman and Cody 3 going to happen at WrestleMania 42? But you know, so we don't know at this point. But so I think it became more clear after WrestleMania. I'm sorry, after the Royal Rumble 2026. So after Punk won the World Heavyweight Championship, Roman Reigns, was the Royal Rumble winner of 2026, and he chose to challenge Punk for the title at WrestleMania. So this rivalry, it just intensified through just these several, high impact promos and confrontations on Raw, and with Reigns just explicitly stating that Punk's 2014 podcast comments just made his life a living hell, and just just all these promo battles over the past month have been spectacular in my mind. From the comments that Punk has made about the oil and jizz comment that Punk made about Roman, and just if you look at the stuff with the Usos being involved, because where Punk made the comment like he was going to bury Roman next to his father, and then the Usos get involved, and they're like telling Punk to apologize. Punk's like doesn't really give an apology, and so um then Punk retaliates by I think in the next week by talking about how um that Roman needs his the Usos. He calls them the young boys, and just he and all this, and like he just there's several back and forth between Punk and Roman here, um, and there's so much to cover here with these promos because they say so much, but it would literally take me like forever just to talk about everything. But I think ultimately, like what needs to be talked about is this promo from this past Monday on Raw, um, when Punk addresses not only Roman, but he addresses The Rock, he addresses TKO, he addresses Pat McAfee, he makes references to Vince McMahon. Um, I mean, and it was amazing. It was moments like watching that live, and I was in that realization while watching. I was like, this is why I fucking love professional wrestling. It's moments like these, and like I said earlier, if I wasn't, already hyped for WrestleMania, that put it on a next level for me. Because just everything, and the thing that really hit home for me was what he says about lowering the ticket prices, and that may not. I mean, just be just a line, maybe something like cool that a lot of people think he threw in there. Like, oh hell yeah, he's our people's champion. He's representing us. He's wanting the lower the ticket prices, like everybody's been talking about, because ticket prices for WWE have been insane for a while now. And I've in the past year, I'll be honest with you guys, I've not been in the greatest financial situation that there is. And just being a wrestling fan, being a WWE fan, and just looking at these prices and stuff, I've basically told myself that I will probably never get to attend a WWE event again at these prices. So now that they're kind of like teasing the idea that they may lower ticket prices again, and by using one of their top stars and one of my favorite guys in the company currently, CM Punk, to do it, um, I can't help for it to get me emotional and fucking hyped to the moon for this match for WrestleMania. Um, and I I'm really like super excited for Raw tomorrow night. See what's what's going to happen even further with this Roman and Punk stuff. Because from what I understand, they're both, going to be there. And I'm just, I know a lot of people, I've seen a lot of comments online that, people are not thrilled with booking and just the build up and just so much stuff that's going in to WrestleMania this year. But man, I love wrestling, dude. Like I really do. Like, and I find I'm a type of person that just finds the positive in everything. I just feel like if you go into something thinking it's going to be bad, thinking you're not going to enjoy it, then chances are you're probably not, because you've already given yourself that mindset that you're not going to enjoy, whatever it is you're watching or listening to, or what you're doing, whatever it is. In this case, wrestling, or WrestleMania. Um, I mean, if I'm being real with you guys, I can't ever remember a perfect WrestleMania where I 100% enjoyed every single thing on the card for a particular WrestleMania. Um, I can't. I can say that there's probably been several WrestleManias that haven't had great builds, but those WrestleManias alone, as a standalone product, as all the matches that were on them, would be great. And on paper, if you're just if you're not a hardcore, devoted wrestling fan, WWE fan, and you're just going in to watch just WrestleMania as just, as a casual fan, or just, you're not even really a wrestling fan, but you're maybe watching it with someone who is a wrestling fan. I mean, on paper, this looks like a fucking stacked card. It looks amazing. And ultimately, I think that's what is important here. Is like, if you guys can go into this, if you can go into WrestleMania with a positive outlook, and just watch it, because I'm without a doubt, I mean, I think a lot of these matches are going to be fantastic. Um, then and I would bet anything that you guys are going to that WrestleMania is going to be awesome for you if you look at it from that perspective. Um, but I mean, that's just my opinion. That's just my thoughts on it. That's just what I'm trying to persuade people to look at it in that way. But of course, that's not always going to be the case. But guys, I just want to say thank you for everyone who tuned in to this WrestleMania 42 breakdown. Just really appreciate you, watching and just listening to me ramble on about just about all these matches, and how much I'm so excited, and just how much I love this product. Um, and that's why I do this, guys. But thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for other things coming up on the channel. So, like I said, multiple times in this stream, on Wednesday, I'm going to have a Road to WrestleMania roundtable with John Grande from Grande's Graveyard and Stuntman Mark, as we're going to be talking about our opinions on all these matches, and just our predictions for the winners of all those matches at WrestleMania. And then on Thursday night, I will be doing another episode of how I got into wrestling with a horror movie artist, Dick Starr. Dick is a guy that I met at conventions a long time ago. I bought several art pieces from him. He's a really cool guy. He loves wrestling. Uh, I know he goes to a lot of the OVW events in Louisville. So super excited to talk to him about wrestling, and so be sure to watch that episode as well. And going forward after that, just stay tuned to the channel. I know we got WrestleManiacs is going to be covering WrestleMania next weekend over on the Dead Pit channel, so be sure to tune in for that as well. But that is it for me tonight, guys. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and watching, and I will see you next time on CraterMania.